Podcasting from Astrolab Studios, this is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we revisit sci-fi, fantasy, and just plain weird shows that have faded from the collective consciousness and didn't quite make the impact that they intended. This week, The Invaders, Part 2.
I've been tracking them for many years, ever since I started writing this. I still don't know where they come from. Our ecosystem is not right for them yet. They want us to ruin the Earth for them.
Why me? I mean, what do I have to do with them?
You were an implant like those others you saw at the hangar. That's their way of controlling someone to do their bidding. Like beating to death a professor outside of a Las Vegas casino.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that's mind-controlled by aliens. I don't know. How's that?
I wonder how it would be if we were mind-controlled by aliens. Well, we'd be talking in real raspy voices like this.
No, that's true. We'd be smoking like nonstop.
How great would it be right now? Now, neither of us smoke, but how great would it be if both of us, while we did our podcast, just leaned back and smoked like it was old-time radio? That'd be great, wouldn't it?
We would look just like Richard Belzer in the show.
That's true, yeah.
He's always smoking, and my favorite part is he'll finish like some rant, and he'll exhale into the mic, like audibly. He'll be like,
to let you know, it's to let the person know that he's smoking very coolly.
And I'm always, whenever we edit these podcasts, I'm always like, I try and take out all the mouth and breath noises, and I can never get them all out. And I'm just like watching the show, and he's just like, oh, they're just leaving him breathing directly into the mic in this television program.
Well, it's because we're not smoking cigarettes. If we were smoking, we'd just be like, right into the mic every time.
So cool.
It is cool.
Anyway, I'm your host, Luke, here with my co-host, Jordan. Hey, Jordan, what's real?
We're watching this really weird miniseries. I mean, we're calling it a miniseries. It's really 2 TV movies.
Yeah, I mean, they tie into each other, though. You couldn't watch the second one without seeing the first one.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, watching the first one, you feel like you've missed something. If you just watch the second one, your head would just explode.
I mean, you start in the middle of a scene.
And you would turn it off after about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'd be out so fast.
So now that you know how good this is, stay tuned for the next hour.
Oh, get ready for part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get started, though, we did a little looking into it because The Invaders, or as occasionally known, The New Invaders, is based on a TV show from like 1967.
Mm-hmm.
Ran for 2 seasons, was also called The Invaders. I didn't know anything about it.
It ran for 2 seasons, but seemed to be pretty popular in that sort of science fiction niche. Like, I don't think it's not as popular as some of the other shows from this time period, you know, The Fugitive or whatever. But there's a lot of extra stuff that came out from the show. We could talk about it a little bit, like it had a comic book series and a lot of books based on it. But there are some similarities between this show that we're watching, the 95 version, and the 67, which is basically aliens have come to Earth. They look just like us. Either they've made themselves to look like humans or they've taken over humans, but they're there to push their will on Earth. Is basically the same basic plot of these two things.
It's funny. I'd expected it to also have environmental themes. I assume that's where the 95 version got these ideas from. But there's really no environmental themes in the original one. It is mostly an allegory for the Red Scare, like you can't trust your friends and neighbors, they might be working against you kind of thing. There really wasn't this idea of broader, I think, environmental damage or even, I mean, fear of the other still, but more in a communist sense. So as far as like borrowing from the show, I think it's borrowing pretty loosely. This miniseries is borrowing pretty loosely from the original series.
Well, I looked at, so in the original series, the aliens apparently, here's ways they could be detected. They had an absence of pulse or heartbeat, and they also had an inability to bleed, which we have clearly not seen in the new show because the alien got shot and bled. But what the main thing was that they had a deformed little finger on their hand that was at a sort of an unnatural angle. Did you read about this?
No, that's very cool, though. I
so
like that.
That was one sign they could see. And so all the aliens had that, and I went and read more about it. And the reason he had decided to have that as being this one thing is it was the 1960s. There was a bit of, still McCarthyism, and people were really, looking to, are these people different? Are they communist or whatever it is? And he had seen in the affectation of when people were taking a drink, and have their finger up as a sort of effeminate quality. And he said people were really scared about, at that time, if you had done that, you might look like you're gay. is basically the thing. So the idea he had was there's this fear of being different or being, well, basically different. So he thought, well, what if I have the aliens have a finger that's sticking out weirdly? And that's where that came from.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which actually is not a bad little idea. I mean, it's a weird thing for aliens to look exactly like humans, except for have this one little digit be off. But when you know the greater context of it, it's actually kind of a neat idea.
Yeah, well, the creator Larry Cohen, I did read a little bit about it, and he was writing this kind of in the era of like the screenwriting blacklist, where you'd be, if you thought you were a communist, you wouldn't be allowed to write movies anymore. So I think he was taking things he saw in his personal social circles, people being afraid of being identified and being put on this blacklist, and putting them into the show. It's interesting. You mentioned The Fugitive earlier. This is actually the follow-up show by the producer of The Fugitive.
That's right, yeah.
The producer of The Fugitive was finishing that series, looking for a new project to get to work on. And this was kind of what he fell into, is he found this Larry Cohen script, liked it. They did 2 seasons of it. And it's interesting, too, because similar plot is like one guy knows aliens are here. He's trying to convince other people it's happening. But there's even early serialized elements to it. As the show went on, he started convincing more people. They started having reoccurring characters who were there to support him. They sort of started finding this interesting balance of like expanding on the idea of the show, but not rebooting every week to like square one.
It's funny, when I read about the show, and I know you've as well, it doesn't feel more like when they did this miniseries, they should have just redone the show? Because it sounds like a better show.
Yeah, it certainly, I think, had some, I mean, I think what we're seeing is why it was popular and why someone thought they should remake it is because it connected with people and was a little different as far as a science fiction show goes, and certainly had some staying power. Like, it feels, reading about it, I'd never heard about it, but it feels kind of like a Battlestar Galactica from the 60s or something. Like, not that it's the same plot, but that people really liked it and really followed it, and there was like spin-offs and comics and books written about it because there was a fan base that developed around it, because it was doing something unique and new.
Can I read you some of the book titles?
Sure.
So here's the names of the books, and you pick the one you'd really like to read. Army of the Undead, that's one. The Autumn Accelerator, Enemies from Beyond, Halo Highway, Invaders, Meteor Man, Dam of Death, Alien Missile Threat, Night of the Trilobites, and, again, The Invaders. So there's one book called Invaders and one The Invaders.
Man, oh man. So I have to read one of these.
Yeah, you got to read one.
I love the title, The Autumn Accelerator.
Yeah.
But it also implies it's going to be real boring.
I think I'd pick Night of the Trilobites.
That was going to be what I was going to say. That would be the one I picked to read.
I also found that apparently in Mad Magazine, issue 119, if you're interested, they did a satire of it, and they called it the Invasioneers. So Mad Comics nailed it once again.
That's pretty good,
yeah.
The Invasioneers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I read a little bit about it too, and, you know, it did okay in the States, but I think it was actually really, really popular in France. And found actually a big audience in Europe. So I think maybe that's where some of its staying power comes. We may not have heard about it as much in North America, and perhaps still even in Europe these days, it's probably not remembered that well. But apparently it was like hugely popular outside of the States.
Maybe they should have had the French remake it. Do a better job.
Oh, I would have watched that for sure. Maybe there is one.
They already have all the people smoking, you know? That's a French stereotype.
You love yourself a good stereotype.
Yeah.
Before we get started, there's one thing I did want to note about the original Invaders and how it ties into this miniseries. Is the original series starred an architect whose partner was taken over by one of these aliens. He discovers it, and he becomes a one-man crusade to stop them. That character's name was David Vincent, and he was played by an actor named Roy Thines. In that first part, right at the start, we saw a man in a suit watching the aliens come down, or watching what we, lights in the sky, and we're implying aliens were there. That character is David Vincent, played by the same actor from the series. So this is where it ties together, is this character from the original series will pop up now in this second part and give us some exposition, and implies that he's been tracking these aliens for many, many years. This is the tie together between these series. They're sort of trying to imply that David Vincent from the original series has been still tracking these aliens all these years and has been the one man at the forefront of this fight, and now is passing the mantle to Bakula. Whether continuity-wise that ties together, really, I'm not sure, but it's a bit of fan service, I think.
I actually felt kind of bad for the guy, because it's a glorified cameo, and you're right, it does try to tie things together, but he doesn't have anything to do, and it's like you could have done more with the guy. Like you have 8 million characters. Why not just have 8 million in one and have him actually have some useful exposition as the show goes along instead of one stupid scene in a car? Anyway.
Well, it's funny. I mentioned this last episode that I liked the character Carlos, the illegal alien who was working at the diner. And I also liked this David Vincent character. And I was like, oh, more of these two. But I think it might just be because they're a bit of a mystery because they get very little to do.
Right.
That I am excited to know more about them just because I'm teased enough and the actors are interesting enough that I'm like, oh, why not more of these? But, maybe in the writing of this actual show, had they focused on them, it wouldn't have made any difference. But
right.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? So shall we get into it?
Let's get started. Here's the IMDb summary for The Invaders, Part 2. A man named Nolan Wood tries to stop an invasion of Earth by aliens disguised as humans. That summary is courtesy of Dirk Gerlich.
Is that the same one for the last time?
Listen, there's so little love for this show. Only one person bothered to write one sentence about it, and there's not separate summaries for each episode, so I just had to use the same one again.
Well, I mean, look, it's the same. Basically, it's just the second half of the same story. There's nothing really that differentiates these two. I will say, though, and I think we mentioned in the previous episode, this is a little bit better half. The second half's a little more action.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly very little love for this series because no one even wants to write about it on IMDb. There's no trivia. There's some goofs, and we'll talk about them this episode.
Oh, really?
But I'll get into them later in the episode because they relate to one very specific part of the plot. But it's quite clear that those goofs were just written by one guy who watched it and was just very annoyed by this one piece of tech they didn't understand.
Right.
Like, nobody else cares about this show.
Right. Yeah, I found the same thing. I tried to find to see if there was any sort of fan base out there, and there's nothing. There's no loving recreation drawings or stories or autographs, or I didn't find any props. This falls under the Omen category of shows that happened and no one ever remembers.
Yeah, we drifted from our consciousness like a bad dream.
So let's spend 2 hours talking about it.
Yay! All right, so let me catch this up real quick. Last week, Scott Bakula discovered he was being mind-controlled by the Invaders with a brain probe. His estranged son sung doo-wah-diddy to him to wake him out of his trance. And now he is driving a tow truck toward a group of invaders who are transferring people into new alien invaders. And his son is screaming for their blood because he wants them dead.
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it.
That kind of catches us up where we left off, is Scott Bakula has the ability to escape or run over some invaders with his son. And thankfully for these invaders, though, they can still control his mind. Maybe not fully, but as long as they all shake and dance around in their chairs like a weird spasm out of control. It's so weird, the mind control thing. How useless is it? The only way you can control someone's mind is to just like jitter around.
Well, what it is they need to visually show something to the audience to show that something's happened other than someone just staring, and they didn't want to use a noise or anything. So what they did is, I don't know if it's one actor started it and then they all had to do it, but old John Boy, he really gives it. He's really jiggling it. But yeah, they have to like gyrate a little bit, and it's funny, and it's not subtle at all, but it is just a visual cue for the audience to know they're doing it.
So Jerry and the other invaders are shaken, trying to control old Bakula so he won't run them over, and they can't fully control Bakula. He has some sort of, these visions help him like sort of deflect their mind control, not completely, but at least enough to not do quite what they want.
Yeah, so what you get is him driving at them and then not, and then driving at them and then not, and that goes on for an eternity.
Well, you get an overhead shot of basically the truck driving in circles around this hangar, and I'm just like, this is so bad.
Yeah, because they're really trying to show that this struggle within him, that they're trying to make him do it. He doesn't want to. But what you can just get is it's just a scene that goes on and on of him driving and like doing wheelies around them.
I mean, yeah, and finally he just chooses to drive out of the building since he won't be able to run over these people, despite his son's like constant screaming for like his son is out of his mind. His son is a sociopath.
I liked him.
Because they drive through the wall of the hangar and basically take off, and not 30 seconds later they're just driving through like all this fog and atmosphere, and a hitchhiker steps out in front of them on the road. It's going to be our wayward David Vincent we were just talking about, but he steps out in front of them in the road, basically trying to flag them down. And Scott Bakula's son once again screams, "Run him over, Dad! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" It's like he's like an evil child or something. And Scott Bakula's like, "No, we shouldn't run over some random stranger." But the son is like desperate for his dad to kill someone.
Big deal. He's bloodthirsty.
It's so weird. But yeah, Bakula pulls over. David Vincent gets in. They have a bit of exposition where David Vincent gives him his self-published zine about the Invaders.
It looks not very high quality. You think of all the time he's had working on it.
He's basically been writing a book for years about all the things he knows about the Invaders and like his many encounters with them over his years of tracking them.
He basically gives him his DVD from the series.
Yeah, and he explains like what the Invaders are up to. They're trying to trick us into ruining our own environment so that they have an environment they'd prefer to live in.
Yeah.
A bit of a roundabout way of doing it. Why not just wreck it yourself? But I guess sure. If you make it's like stop hitting yourself. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. That's a good way of saying it. You're all right though. It's like if you guys want the environment to be so bad, just like shoot off.
Stop polluting yourself. Stop polluting it.
Yeah, it's like, well, just pollute it then. Like you guys have all these abilities to do stuff, and also, don't you think it would make more sense then to attack like heads of government as opposed to, I don't know, a guy that works at a diner and stuff like that? Like who cares what they do?
Yeah, it is very much in that 90s conspiracy vein where it's just like fucking with the regular man will make something happen.
Yeah.
In all this sort of exposition here, David Vincent reveals finally why the brain control devices won't work on Bakula, why he's having these visions, why he's one of the few people who can like stop the brain control sort of.
And Luke, let me just preface this with what Luke is going to give you right now may be the dumbest and greatest line of dialogue I think we've seen so far in any of the shows. Almost in 40 episodes of doing this podcast, we've never had a line like this.
I mean, it certainly is coming into part 2. This has not been brought up ever. And, we know that Bakula can sort of avoid the mind control and that he has these weird visions that aren't all that super helpful. But basically, David Vincent postulates the reason why the brain control devices don't work is, and here's the quote, "It may be because of the autism you had as an infant."
I was like, I don't know what that is. I wrote that. I know we both had that. Both had that note. We both talked about it. It's like, what were the writers thinking?
I mean, I tried to do some Googling to get more information, and I guess he got autism from vaccines. Like his parents must have given him a vaccine. That's where autism comes from? That's not true. Sorry, everybody.
On my mouth is just agape.
No, but I was trying to go. I'm like, is that something you can have as a child and then kind of not have again? Because he has displayed no elements of autism at all so far, and they seem to be implying that he had a real brief bout of autism as a kid. He's better now.
Like it's so ludicrous and
it's so distasteful.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so bad. And here's the thing: if I'm not saying it's a good idea to have autism be the way that aliens can control your mind. Okay, let's just say it is a good idea. It's not. But if that's what you're going with, okay, you're a crazy person, but that's the idea you're going with, then have him have autism. Have the character have autism, and that's your main character,
Yeah, have done some research on it.
Yeah, do some research on it, and then have things that result from the character having autism and how does that manifest itself in this plot line. Okay, but the idea of just going, oh yeah, remember when you used to have that disorder, or I'm not sure what the actual term would be for, but that condition, and they just throw it out there and then everyone just moves on. He does say though, he goes, your brain signals snafus their signals. Snafus. That's the word he used.
Yeah, right. Snafus their signals. Yeah, and he also goes into explaining, because of this infant autism he had, not only is he not susceptible to this, brainwashing, whatever, he's also able to tap into the collective consciousness of the aliens, which is what these visions are. Like, he's visualizing what their plans are because they all share collective consciousness that explains their plans to him via visions. None of it added up.
Was that what it was supposed to be? I guess I didn't catch that. I thought, yeah, I don't know what I thought. I didn't know that's what they were trying to imply though.
Yeah, I think we'll see it later is when he needs to solve a problem, the flashes now show him exactly what the plan is.
Oh, right.
There's no other way he would know what they were planning to do, but thankfully their collective consciousness and his autism allow him to see the plans they have. It's ludicrous.
Doesn't autism give you psychic abilities? I mean, it might as well in this show, in this universe.
It is funny. I don't know enough about autism and how it works to like really speak too definitively on it, but like the way they're using it here is insane.
Yeah.
And anyway, David Vincent, who just lays this all on us. How does he know anything about this guy's medical history? Who knows? But he lays all this exposition on us, jumps out of the car, and is gone for the rest of the show.
It's the most thankless cameo they could have, and it's just like, oh yeah, we gotta have the guy from the original series. We'll just have him come in and talk about autism for a minute, then he's off again. To have what I assume is more exciting adventures.
Yeah. I mean, this is the first 10 minutes of the second episode, and I'm like, this second episode is already more insane now than the first episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bakula takes his kid back to the diner. Basically, the police show up and arrest him, and the kid ends up back with his mom and his stepdad, the alien Jerry. And we're reminded immediately that, oh yeah, remember his mom? She's pregnant. I guess with an alien baby?
I know. They actually don't really talk about that.
It's really weird. But yeah, Scott Bakula is immediately rearrested. Thankfully, that Dr. Ellen Gazzara, we left her at the diner in the last episode talking with the illegal alien Carlos. And after Scott Bakula is arrested, or as he's being arrested, he tells his kid to give Doc Ellen, the Invaders pamphlet that David Vincent put together. So now she basically gets as caught up as he is on what's happening because she gets a book full of information.
Mm-hmm.
And like, thank God, because if I had to hear anyone else explain it again, it'd be insane. But like, essentially, like, catches all our other characters who weren't involved in the previous scenes up on what's happening.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets us rolling into this episode. Like, it gets rolling pretty quickly after we get started. Everybody's caught up. There are aliens. They're everywhere. He's going back to prison.
I like that the main character, he goes back to jail like 3 times in this. Like, he's never controlling situations in this. It's always, he's running away, he gets caught, and then gets put away, and then he has to break out. Then he gets caught, and he gets put away, and he gets broke. That's his whole character arc through this whole show.
You're not wrong. He is constantly just being captured and released.
Yeah. He's like a fish.
Detective Coyle, of course, returns. He's right now investigating a terrorist attack, the death of a doctor in a hospital, a runaway fugitive in the form of Bakula, and he basically goes out to the airport hangar that Bakula and the kid claims the aliens were in. And when they get there, obviously there are no aliens left. The invaders have left it, but all the phone booths are still there. Like, they open it up and it's just like an empty hangar, but with 10 phone booths sitting in it and like bleachers. But they're like, well, kid, doesn't appear to be anything going on here. I guess you and your dad are liars.
I like that they brought Nolan to the warehouse to arrest him there. Well, okay, we'll listen to you until we get to the warehouse, but if there's only phone booths there, we're arresting you.
Yeah. Well, it's very funny, too, because this kid has, like, become insane at this point. Because after the detective says, like, you know, there's nothing here, the kid just turns around and screams at the detective, go to hell.
Is that what he says?
The kid becomes a delinquent. Like, later, he will scream at other cops. He's basically just yelling and screaming for blood. I couldn't get over this kid in the second part. He's insane.
Yeah. Well, no one's telling him not to. His one mom's, she can't help. She's working at the diner. His other dad's an alien, you know?
No, it's very true. In fact, let's just do this now, actually. Kind of for, like, most of this episode with this kid, what we see of him is he's around the diner. Everything's gone back to normal, basically. Like, all the invaders are coming. They're all getting their steak and eggs. And the kid is just throwing a fit. Like, they come in, get their steaks and eggs. The kid's just screaming at all the patrons, being like, you're all aliens. Every single one of you is an alien.
And they just keep eating.
And, like, they're just like, I don't care. You're a kid. No one's going to believe you. And the mom's, like, apologizing for him. And the kid gets so upset for the mom apologizing to the invaders about their, you know, weirdo steak and egg diet that he turns around and, like, screams at the mother, like, and points at her belly. He's like, you've got an alien inside of you. It's disgusting.
You never do that to a pregnant lady.
He is basically throwing a fit for the rest of the episode. We won't talk about him too much more, but it's so weird.
He does mention, though, in this scene, Luke, he mentions their weird fingers, which you never actually see. But he goes, look at their weird fingers. To the mom. That. But the thing is, I get it. It's like a fun little callback to the original series, but they don't play with it at all. And also, none of them have weird fingers. So it's like, well, okay, well, what are you pointing out then?
Well, it's a good thing you looked into that, actually, because I would never have caught that line. And it would have made no sense to me if you hadn't known about the pinkies from the original series. Yeah, because it made no impact on me at all. Getting back to Bakula, he actually gets a quick reprieve from prison because Apparently, he very quickly gets a public defender
Right.
who orders an MRI at the same hospital he just escaped from because he's hoping to use Bakula's history of dizziness and autism as a defense against the crimes he's committed.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, like he says those are the two reasons he wants this MRI scan of his brain.
You know what? It sounds like a good lawyer to me.
And it's interesting because we think we're going to get an MRI scene where they put him in and you scan his brain and they're going to finally find this like probe that's in his brain. But the MRI reveals nothing. Like there's a little bit of like distortion on the MRI, but they're like, well, his brain's perfectly healthy.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with him. We can go to trial. But really what it is it gets him back to the hospital where Doc Ellen works at. She recruits one of her nurse friends, and now she breaks him out of the hospital. So he's briefly captured, gets an MRI, she breaks him out, and now they're just where they were like 15 minutes before. Now Doc Ellen and Bakula are on the run from the cops again.
But it's good that you point this out because basically they could have just cut these two hospital breaks into one. Just get rid of one of them. You only had to have them once and just put all the stuff you had in the 1 to 2 scenes into one. You don't need to do this twice. You're just wasting time.
Well, and it's very funny too because this man literally just broke out of this hospital from the cops. You think they'd have tighter security on him.
But is this when we get to the part where the doctor and the hot doctor, the detective and the hot doctor, they're hitting on each other?
Well, this is what happens is after they escape, Detective Coyle goes back to talk to Dr. British Lady to find out, what she knows and where Doc Ellen might have run to. And, Dr. British Lady doesn't have a lot of information, but, as long as you're in the middle of this, like, multiple case, why don't you just ask her out on a date?
It's hard for him to meet normal people when he's always working.
Yeah, he's always working. He's never solving any crimes. So why don't we go on a quick little date as long as we're doing it? It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre, this scene.
Oh, and we haven't mentioned that the detective has a partner who doesn't really do anything other than kind of be Weasley.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even write him in my notes because I'm like, oh, this detective has a partner who's not a character?
Yeah, he doesn't. I think he comes and he has one funny line when he first shows up, like some real one-liner, and then he literally is just in the background for the rest of the show.
Oh, and speaking of characters we may have forgotten about, remember the talk radio conspiracy host, Richard Belzer?
Yes, I do.
Well, he's still here, and he's handing out helpful plot points. He's required in this episode because he establishes that LA Metro Rail, their sort of subway transit line, is opening a new station this week. In fact, possibly even this day. And a very special senator will be there opening it. A man who's a real environmentalist, and one day they think he may be president.
After a lot of time and a lot of really slow revving up, you get the idea that this whole thing about making aliens look like people and making these sort of like Manchurian candidate assassins, all this is really working up to they want to do one big attack on one politician to wreck the environmental plan so that pollution will be more popular?
Yeah, they want to assassinate this senator because he's pro-environment and that's against their plans, basically. And they're going to use this subway opening as their opportunity to do it. And, and the reason they bring Belzer in to explain it is because his character doesn't like a lot of things. He doesn't like public transportation, doesn't like immigrants, doesn't like environment, doesn't like the environment, he doesn't like the senator.
Didn't you get the sense, though, that he kind of flip-flopped? Like, he seems to be angry. First, he goes on and on about how much he hates Scott Bakula's character. Then later he's like, hey, maybe I'm on his side.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it, but that's how it ends, is he flip-flops on Scott Bakula. But, he hates Bakula. At some point, he hates this subway they're opening because he says freedom to drive should be in the Constitution.
Oh, I like that.
He is basically there to just provide plot points, and they just give him any extremist stance they can, whether that extremist stance contradicts the last thing he just said or not.
Right.
It's very odd. And I'm going to ask you, I wrote this down in my notes here. Like, we actually do we kind of talked about it, but we go back to the diner briefly and have the kid yell about stuff, and we know this guy's going on a date, and there's kind of two people this could be happening, or three people actually, because here's how the characters are split up right now. You've got Bakula and Doc Ellen on the run together. You've got Jerry and Amanda, the mom. They're back together now at the diner. And we just saw that Detective Coyle and the Dr. British Lady are going to go on a date. Mm-hmm. There's a scene right now where two people have sex. And I don't know who those two people are.
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's the doctor and the detective.
Are you sure? Is it? Or is it Amanda and Jerry?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny.
Or is it Bakula and Dr. Ellen?
I thought the same thing. Well, they make you think it's Bakula and Dr. Ellen because they're having this sort of scene. They're getting to know each other. It's almost an intimate scene. They're very close. They're clearly this horrible situation is bringing them together, and then they cut to a sex scene. But it's so darkly lit, you can't tell who's having sex. But I don't think it's Bakula. I think it's one of the other two. I think it's the detective and that doctor because later on she's you know she is an alien.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure who it's supposed to be. It was cut in such a weird way. Also, first sex scene I think we've seen in a show.
I think you're right. And what a sex scene.
I mean, it felt like it was just added in because someone was like, "Gotta have a sex scene," because it was cut apropos to nothing. I couldn't figure out who was having sex. I was baffled.
Well, I like that neither of us knew, so that's a well shot it was.
Like, I literally wrote a note midway through the episode being like, I don't know where this falls in the plot. I don't know who this is. Because, like, I don't know what's happening. All you see is someone's back getting scratched.
Oh, that's right.
Really badly, too.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think it's the Doctor alien. It's like she has superpowers or something.
All right. I thought it could be Jerry and the wife, too, because, I don't know, they're a married couple. They can have sex if they want.
That's true.
She's pregnant, though. Can you do that?
I was going to make a joke, and I'm not going to do it.
Good for you, Jordan.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's catch up with Doc Ellen and Bakula. They place a call to the diner and speak to the Mexican Carlos in Spanish so that no one can hear what they're talking about. But they're basically asking him to kidnap the kid from his mother and drive him to LA to be with, his father with a restraining order.
What I like, though, about Carlos is he doesn't hesitate at all. They basically call him and be like, can you help kidnap the kid? He's like, yep.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. Yeah, what do you need
I know
from
my
me?
status in this country is very questionable, but
he's super reliable, though. You always know you can call Carlos no matter what it is. You're like, Carlos, I got a dead body. Help me clean it up. He's like, yep, I got a mop. Like he's the friend you want.
It's very funny because the scene ends as he's been on the phone talking Spanish the whole time so that Amanda, who doesn't speak Spanish, won't know what he's saying. And as he gets off the phone, Amanda walks up to him and she's like, who are you talking to? He's like, my niece. And Amanda just looks at him and she says, no personal calls on the phone. This is like, she's the rudest employer.
Yeah, get back to mopping. Like, how much mopping can you do in one place? He's always mopping.
She really treats him like a second-class citizen, and it really made it hard to root for her. She's the one character you should feel the worst for because she's, like, married to an alien, doesn't know what's going on. Like, no one's telling her anything, but they play her like such a mean person.
Well, they have her sort of like a bit of a shrew character. Like, she's just there to get upset and stop other people from having fun. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a great part. She does get redeemed a little bit at the end, but yes, she's an annoying character, unfortunately.
They give her the least to do.
That's true. I don't think she ever leaves the diner really until like the end. She's just like walking around the diner. That's all she does.
Even when her son goes missing repeatedly, she never calls the police, leaves the diner to look for him, or does anything about it. She just like frets.
Well, it's because like there's just a constant need of steak and eggs, and she just can't get away. Every time she thinks she's gonna get away, they're like, one more order of steak and eggs.
Yeah, this show is so confusing. Maybe you can explain this to me, but we get a few scenes now with Bakula and Doc Ellen, and they're sitting kind of having lunch, and they piece together the invaders' plan to kill the senator at the subway opening because of environmentalism. But I couldn't figure out how they put that together. They seem to be they're not even reading the book from David Vincent. They're just like, based on what we know, this must be their plan.
Yeah, I think they implied that, like, because they've gone now to his house, right? I think we didn't say that. They go to David Vincent's house and they see all the clippings on the wall, and which, by the way, doesn't help you to look less insane by having your house entirely covered with alien clippings. But they basically read all that. They read his book, and then somehow they piece together. Oh, it's not now, is it, that they realize with the subway? I think they go down to they know something's going to happen with the subway because they mix it with his visions, but I don't think they know the exact plan yet.
No, they talk about it as they have this dinner, and the only reason I knew it was happening is because we heard Richard Belzer talking about it. But I don't know how they
listen to
figured it
radio.
out.
That's how they listen to the radio.
I mean, maybe that is it. Maybe they were just listening to the radio on the way to lunch, and that's how they put it together. Because I didn't see a scene where I saw them gather the pieces. It just didn't make sense to me how they had come to this conclusion. I mean, other than I was happy they were driving the plot forward. But.
Right. But and he does keep having now visions of a subway tunnel.
Yes, the visions now come into play, and that now he sees a subway tunnel, and now we know his visions are the aliens' collective consciousness about their plans,
right,
or something.
Right.
I don't know. They lose the book here. There's a lot of things that just happen. Like, they lose the book to the police, David Vincent's, like, alien book. It ends up with Detective Coyle somehow. He reads it. He believes in the aliens now. He goes and tells his captain that he thinks Bacula's being set up by aliens, and his captain doesn't fire him on the spot.
Right.
But
yeah.
He doesn't exactly believe him.
Let's see where this goes.
And here's maybe my question about why I'm not sure that sex scene is between Detective Coyle and the British lady, because the next scene we cut to is Detective Coyle, I guess, on his date with the British lady, but their date appears to be some light bondage. He's just tied to a chair with his shirt off.
Yeah.
And it felt like this was the first time they were together or something, because he was just like, oh, this is different.
I think the answer is that sex scene is just two other characters we haven't met before.
Great.
They're just two random people.
He's tied to a chair. She's tied him there because he thinks it's going to be something sexy, but she's just going to put a face hugger on him and jam a mind control thing up his nose, because he's just sitting there talking to a woman he's met twice about how he believes there are aliens now.
Yeah.
Essentially, though, Detective Coyle, who is starting to believe them, is now, I guess, a sleeper agent. So we know as an audience, you can't trust Detective Coyle. I guess that's what we're supposed to get out of that, right?
Yeah, that's it.
It's a long way to go for very little payoff. But we need to get all these characters to the subway now, I guess. So we cut back to the diner. Carlos is trying to, like, find the kid because he's going to kidnap him not kidnap him because the kid wants to go, but he's going to take the kid and bring him to Bacula in the city. But before he can do that, Amanda catches her husband, Jerry, out back, just huffing exhaust out of the back of a truck.
Yeah, and that's not a normal thing.
It's interesting because what we see is she sees this. It clearly upsets her. It doesn't feel like anyone's explained to her the aliens or what they do. So I'm not sure how she pieces this together, but essentially she starts vomiting immediately because I guess she feels so much disgust because she slept with an alien. I didn't quite buy that she would be able to piece all these pieces together, but whatever. We just need to get this plot moving, I guess,
that's what it is. It's you just sort of go, don't worry about it. She knows now that there's been a conversation you haven't seen where someone has told her all about the aliens, so now it's all coming to fruition.
It's all clicking together. The kid has gone through Jerry's desk and kind of found a pamphlet for the Metro links that kind of has like a date and time on it. So now I guess the kid and Carlos will know where to go. Like, there's a lot of just like real quick things to like explain how anyone would know anything about the plot. Carlos comes to get the kid. Jerry shows up with a gun. He's like, well, I'm going to kill you both because you both know my secret, I guess. Amanda, it's so funny. Carlos finds the kid. Jerry walks up behind them with a gun. Amanda walks up behind him with a shotgun.
Yeah.
Like, it's awkwardly staged, so quickly put together. And essentially, Amanda blasts Jerry in the back with a shotgun because now she knows he's an alien, I guess.
And let's just say, she just shot and killed her husband because she thought he might be an alien. Maybe. Like, they don't have a conversation about it. She just kills him.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, everyone at home. I'm going to jump back for 2 seconds. When the kid finds the like pamphlet with all the information about, the subway or whatever, we get a quick shot of Jerry spying on the kid doing this. I'm not sure if you noticed because the quality was so bad, but they push it on Jerry's face very quickly and his eyes become lizard eyes.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
It's very subtle. And I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to what we've seen before, but like his eyes very quickly like slit into lizard eyes when he realizes he's been found out.
Well, that's what happens. That's what happens to the aliens.
So you think this is like delving into the idea that like lizard people run the world? Is that the conspiracy they're digging into?
I think they just thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if he had funny eyes? That's it.
Anyway, we'll get back to where we were. Amanda's just shot Jerry, her husband, who she now knows is an alien. She tells Carlos to get the kid to LA to Bacula. It's the only one who can help them now. And we get what is got to be the darkest scene of the entire show.
Which is that?
Essentially, Carlos takes the kid.
Oh, yeah.
And they get in a truck. And as they walk away, we hear the mom fire the gun again. And we get a big flash of light, which we know means Jerry has died. Because when the aliens die, they disappear in a flashlight and leave flies behind. The kid turns around. And what we hear is a second gunshot of his mother killing herself because she's pregnant with an alien baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is fucked up.
It's a weird thing because it's not that like you can't have an emotional moment like this in the show, but it's not really earned at all. And it just felt like they wrote her as a character and then knew, well, if this becomes a series, what are we going to do with this pregnant lady? So let's just get rid of her. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it was really weird. I mean, it happens off screen, so maybe they thought if they went to series, they would bring her back. Maybe it was supposed to be a mislead, but in the way it plays now, where the show just ends, it just does feel like a pregnant woman has killed herself. And it's like, I was just like, this feels bad. And not only does she do that, she's done it essentially in front of her son.
Yeah.
It just felt really bad and like off kilter for a show that's already not very good. But like, this was probably my least favorite moment of the entire show.
Yeah. Anyways, but the most important thing is she's now not a character anymore.
Oh, we finally got rid of that character we didn't want.
I know. That's the thing. That's what it felt like. It felt like the writers created a character, didn't know what to do with her, didn't like her, and then just killed her.
The Gary A. Larson School of Writing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. But yes, what has happened now is the kid and Carlos know to go to the subway. Bakula and Doc Allen know to go to the subway. It's getting all our characters to head to the same place so we can like move on with this episode. And what we get is we arrive at the subway, the senator is giving his speech, and it's mostly about smog and like how smog is killing LA.
I know what you're going to say.
Well, this was a personal note because we're from Canada. It was just a really weird thing. But essentially the senator, his campaign promise is like, I'm going to get California that good Canada air.
I know. I was like, did Canada have the gold standard of air, I guess, in 1995?
I guess so. Everyone just looks at our air and is super jealous.
Yeah, I laughed too, and I was like, "What a weird line." But yeah, it's Canada's the gold standard, and that's his big platform.
Yeah, and essentially what we get here is because of A, we get to see what the aliens are doing, and B, we get to see Bakula's flashes of their collective consciousness. We come to understand what the whole plan is. The senator is going to ride the subway at some point. The aliens have infiltrated the Metrolink subway system and turned off ventilation in the subways. And apparently, which is something I didn't know, but this series tells me is true, under Los Angeles, there's a lot of methane gas. So if they don't ventilate the subways, it's going to fill up with methane gas. So I guess the essential idea is the senator's going to get on a subway. He's going to ride the subway. They're going to crash the subway, which is going to cause an explosion of methane gas, which is not just going to kill the senator, but also, I guess, destroy the subway line. Also furthering their non-environmental agenda. That seems to be what is
That's exactly
stakes
what
of the
is.
show. It's very confusing and takes a while to come out because there's so much back and forth about it. But the one thing I did like is because Bakula knows what's happening, he basically calls the Metrolink Central Command and talks to like the guy who runs it. And do you know who the actor was who was playing basically the head of the control room?
I don't know his name, but I know he was a character in Seinfeld.
He's Joe, let me see if I can pronounce this right. Joe Polito. And I know him because he's a regular in the Coen Brothers movies and always a standout player in those movies. So he's a really good actor. And he actually does a great job with what is a very thankless role in this. Is he's a man on a phone talking to nobody the entire time, but he's always under stress.
The movie now becomes the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. That's what this becomes. It becomes there's something happening in a subway, and they have to keep cutting to the controller who is just dealing with stuff on the phone. So that's...
Yeah, he's giving instructions to Bakula on what to do. He's calling his crew to find out what's up with this methane leak. He's doing all this work. And I will say, like, this was my favorite part of this entire 2 episodes was, like, watching this guy, like, kind of do this control room, like, NASA-y kind of, like, he's calling. He's always sweating. He's trying to get this stuff figured out. Well, he's in the dark, but he's a good man and trying to do a good job.
Yeah.
He was my favorite character, and I looked him up on IMDb because I needed to find his name. Uncredited.
But don't you think this right here could have been all that this movie needed to be? Was guy gets out of prison, he thinks he was controlled by aliens, he's trying to prove it, and he finds out there's an assassination plot, and he's got to stop this train from crashing. That's all this movie needed to be. All the first hour and a half of this could have just been cut away.
Yeah, it could have just been a Manchurian Candidate, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it's all it needed to be, and it is the best parts of it. It just still isn't that great, but it is the best parts
It's
of the show.
by far the best parts.
Bakula and Doc Ellen are watching the senator's speech while they're trying to like figure out what to do, and they see Detective Coyle in the crowd. And since they think he's on their side, they go to try to talk to him, but of course we know he's been mind controlled. So he pulls a gun, which once again causes Bakula to start running away. Like once more, they split up so Bakula can run and hide, and essentially he puts on another like pair of clothing. Like he puts on a jumpsuit for a
maintenance
station worker.
Yeah, well, I like
Maintenance
that.
worker?
We should have kept a track of one, how many times he gets arrested, how many times he escapes, and how many times he puts on a uniform to get through a scenario. It's just like, guys, this is bad.
Yeah, and basically what happens is it interrupts the speech, but no one thinks it's a bad idea for the senator to continue to ride the subway, even though like a convicted murderer is on the loose or something.
Yeah.
But he gets on the subway with Detective Coyle. Bakula somehow also sneaks onto the same subway car because he's wearing a uniform, a maintenance worker's uniform.
Well, you know what I like, though? He sneaks on because he has the maintenance uniform, but then immediately after, the guy who lets him by calls in and is like, I think that guy's on the train. I'm like, why didn't you stop him? Like 2 seconds ago.
That is true. That guy like waves him through, and then as if second guessing himself, as soon as the train leaves, like maybe that was a murderer. This basically gets us into like the final moments. Like this builds to our climax here because Detective Coyle's obviously mind controlled. He immediately like kills the subway driver. He just shoots the guy as he's driving.
I didn't understand, why would you send the alien controlled cop onto the train and have the train explode? Why not just have the cop get on the train and then just shoot him and then explode it?
It's confusing. I think they needed an alien controlled person on because they needed to kill the driver, because the intent was to drive the subway car because they're going to a new subway stop. That subway stop ends in a brick wall, I guess, and they're going to crash the subway car into the brick wall. When it crashes, it's going to set off sparks, which set off the methane, which is going to blow up the new subway stop. It's a very complicated plan to, I guess, kill the senator, make it look like an accident-ish, and destroy the subway line. Mm-hmm. Like, that seems to be the plan. It's a very complicated one to pull off because, yeah, they needed to plant Detective Coyle with the senator. Detective Coyle kills his driver, so now the subway's out of control. And Bakula, you know, thank God he's there. Our hero's on the subway, so he's able to, like, use a rubber ball to distract Detective Coyle.
This scene, it set it up like something great was going to happen. And basically what you have is Detective Coyle has now taken these people under hostage, right? And so it's the politician and a couple of his handlers are there. And Bakula's on the train too, and he's hiding behind some chairs, and he has a rubber ball. And the first thing he does is he rolls the ball to one of the ladies, and then to let her know that he's there, like, oh, don't worry, I'm going to save you. And she's like, yeah, okay. And she rolls it back. And then I think he slides her a briefcase.
Yeah.
And then he keeps bouncing the ball to distract the guy. And you're like, what's his plan going to be? What's in the briefcase? But what it is while the detective's just talking to him, the lady just hits the guy over the head with a briefcase. Yeah. That's it. That was the whole plan.
It's not much of a plan. I mean, it works. They
like, didn't you think there would be something in the briefcase?
I don't know. It didn't make any sense because as soon as he started bouncing the ball to get his attention, I'm like, what's going to happen? And then what happened was, yeah, it was what you described. It was a really weird, boring, like,
yeah.
He should have just shot them all. Like, it would have been very easy.
Like, literally, the scene would be better if he was like, hey, ball's in your court, and he throws the ball in the guy's face or something. That's better.
Something heroic.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that just is really the point is they've stopped Detective Coyle. They've handcuffed him to the railing so he can't do any more damage. And the rest of the scene is essentially Bakula talking to the mission control man, trying to figure out how to stop the train without causing any sparks to set off the methane. And they're like, you can't pull the emergency brake, that'll set off sparks. And for some reason, the aliens have messed with the controls, so you can't, like, just stop the train normally. It's not very clear.
It's just a way to have the guy on the phone and go, cut the wire, do this. That's basically what they're setting up.
And then they do this thing where they're like, you're going to have to make a shunt on the battery of the train, like redirect the electricity so it slows down the train, ?
I didn't get that. Well, I don't know how trains work, but I didn't know what was happening. He suddenly was taking like wrenches and putting them on top of the battery, and I was like, what is happening?
And in the end, even that doesn't work. He ends up just like releasing these hoses that are, I guess, I wrote it down here. They're the high pressure brake hoses on the train. So as soon as he releases the pressure from them, the train just starts to brake on its own and slows down and stops. Yeah. And I guess that's what saves the day. Here, this is the part on IMDb. The only writing anyone's ever done about this show is on the goof section, and all of the goofs are related to how a subway works. The guy's just like, they use the wrong term for the subway driver. This is not how a shunt works. And if you did do this, it would set off so many sparks, it would be the opposite effect of what you'd want to do. Like, some guy went in and wrote like a ton of notes about how they just don't know how the subway works. That's the only writing anyone's ever done about the show, is their complete lack of knowledge on subways.
Well, it is funny because they spend, this sequence probably is like 10 minutes.
Oh, it's so long.
It's long, maybe longer, and it's a lot of him trying something, it doesn't work, and trying something doesn't work. And I like that it's not like such an easy, he just does it and saves the day. But what you get is it just feels so drawn out. And it's like, oh, I don't need to see him keep failing at it when just nothing's happening. Like, it's not interesting. He doesn't ever progress the action at all. It's just him, as always, just reacting to things. Mm-hmm. And it just is kind of boring. And sadly, it's probably one of the better sequences in this show.
I mean, I would say it is one of the better sequences. My biggest problem was they were trying to explain to me the mechanics of what he's trying to do, but I just couldn't follow. It wasn't that it was dense, it just wasn't clear. So it was tough for me to be invested in like a dangerous maneuver they're trying to pull off that I didn't understand.
Well, because they have this one scene where he's going to put a wrench on and he's going to touch two metal parts, and it's like, oh no, what's going to happen? I'm like, I don't know what is going to happen.
I need more information.
Like, I need more information. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about this. And then it's like he put it on. I'm like, okay, good, move on.
Yeah. At any rate, what happens is the subway comes to a stop in this subway station. The senator and his people get off, and for whatever reason, I mean, I guess it's because Bakula feels bad for Detective Coyle because it's not his fault. Detective Coyle's being mind controlled. It's not his fault he did all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So Bakula takes the keys to the handcuffs they've handcuffed Detective Cole with, and he lets him go, and he tells Detective Cole, he's like, just run. You have to just run now. Like, you can't trust yourself. Just get out of the city, go into hiding, get away. You know, it's kind of nice, but obviously maybe not the safest thing to do with a man who's just tried to kill you. But And what we kind of get here is Bakula leaves him. Detective Coyle gets off the subway car, and for some reason on the subway platform, which should be high security, but I guess because Dr. British Lady is an invader, she can get past security. But like Detective Coyle gets off, and Dr. British Lady's just waiting for him on the subway platform.
Yeah.
Which is very strange. I don't know why that was required, but essentially Detective Coyle's like, oh, you put a brain control thing in my head, and he pulls his gun on her, and she tries to like shake and shimmy and mind control him.
Didn't this feel like this was an extra beat that wasn't needed? Like, you wouldn't have finished this and said, well, I wonder what happened to that detective. Who cares?
No, and here's the thing is, he doesn't have autism. Why is he able to resist her?
It's true.
But
he doesn't.
He's able to resist her mind control. Not enough to shoot her, but he manages to fire his gun.
Yeah.
And the entire subway explodes, basically killing them both, I guess.
I don't know if you mentioned earlier, but I wrote down, you know how much methane was in there?
92%.
That's it? Is a methane count to 92? That's a lot, Luke.
I mean, I assume there's no oxygen in there at all.
Yeah.
It was very funny when they gave that percentage. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I know. I just like that, though. It's at 92%. I'm like, oh, man, that's 8% away from 100.
I know. Like, how much is normal? 90%?
Yeah. What's normal? 91%.
But once it hits that 1% more, so dangerous.
It's dangerous.
But yeah, it's a huge explosion, kills Doc British Lady, kills Detective Coyle, gets those characters out of the show. And the explosion helps basically because in the chaos surrounding the explosion, Bakula meets up with Doc Ellen and Carlos and the kid, and the four of them all, I guess, escape into the crowd because now they're like an alien fighting team, which is
team is assembled.
Yeah, an interesting team to assemble.
Of all the characters we met at the beginning of the show, I wouldn't have thought that would be the team.
Yeah, I know, right? What a weird people to go off to have further Invaders-related adventures.
So just to reiterate, you got the guy who used to have autism. You've got the doctor whose boyfriend was killed. You have the guy who spent the entire show either driving a kid or cleaning floors. And you have a kid who might be a psychotic killer.
Yeah, who may have had a psychotic break and is now a sociopath.
Yeah, that's your team.
Yeah, and the whole show ends on Richard Belzer giving another kind of wrap up of what's been happening, so we, the radio audience, will know what adventures Bakula's been up to. And this is what you're talking about earlier. He starts by blaming Bakula for the subway explosion. And he's doing this because he hates cops, because he thinks cops are incompetent, and Bakula's proof to him the cops are incompetent. But then he starts talking about how the whole thing seems to have been an assassination attempt on the senator. And Richard Belzer hates that senator because he's such a liberal. Like, he hates this environmentalism thing he's trying to push on us. So Richard Belzer comes to the conclusion that maybe Bakula's an all right guy if he was trying to kill the senator.
Yeah.
Like, he does a lot of backflips through this, and I know this never goes to series, but maybe we can talk about this in a second. But I was very excited for the idea that, like, eventually in this series, they were definitely going to like team up with Belzer, and he was going to join the team. Which I was like,
well, what would probably happen is there'd be a special episode where he was always, every episode Belzer's there giving his commentary, but in one episode, there's a plot where, I don't know, the Cylons need to send a signal out at the radio station, so they show up there, and he becomes part of the team for one episode, and maybe they turn him around a little bit, At the end, he's learned a little something about them and a little something about himself.
Yeah, and he uses his radio station to give them signals.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I mean, that wraps up the episode pretty much. Like, it kind of just, they've defeated this one plot. The invaders are still out there, but so are our heroes now.
And that's it. I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas in this. I thought the cast was pretty good. There's a couple kind of neat sequences, but overall, it's so long and so drawn out, and there's way too many characters and way too many plot lines that don't go anywhere, and this could have just been streamlined into an okay thing as opposed to a not very good thing.
Jordan, we've done this before, but what do you think would be what would have been a typical episode for the show, do you think? Like, what do you think like the story engine would have been moving forward had this gone to series?
I think every episode, because there's now a team, right? There's a team assembled of people. I think every episode they have an alien problem they have to solve, but thankfully each of them had some sort of disorder as a child that has helped them be able to solve the problem. They're like, hey, Carlos, remember you had polio as a child? And then that really helps him later on.
He's like super strong now. That's because polio makes you
and they're like,
superhero.
doctor, remember that small bout of Down syndrome that you had? Well, guess what? It's going to help in this problem.
Well, one thing I noticed they set up at the end, I was like, what a weird way to set this up, given everything that's happened in this episode. But there seems to be this implication that Dr. Ellen and Bakula are going to kind of like have a thing. But at the end, they also sort of set up that like, oh, and now Doc Ellen is going to be this kid's mom. Like they start like seeding that idea. I was just like, this is so weird. They're like also going to like start an instant family with these people.
Yeah, I think that's they kind of implied. Yeah, there was going to be a bit of a family. But isn't it weird that the kid doesn't seem upset at all about his his parents dying? Like he clearly has some issues, this kid.
Yeah, he seems kind of into his dad and this new mom he's got, even though his mom literally just shot herself in front of him, basically.
Maybe that's what the show's going to be. The show's going to be a slow reveal that this kid is some sort of like Antichrist.
Oh, it's like The Omen.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, that's the actual plot to The Omen, not the plot to the Omen TV show we watched.
Right, which was not The Omen.
That'd be great if this show was just The Omen, but it was called The Invaders, and that show was just The Poltergeist, but it was called The Omen.
The 90s.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. I don't think there's a lot more to be said about this show because it is what it is. What do you want to give this final part 2?
I think we mentioned at the beginning, this was a little bit better than the last one. I don't actually remember what I gave. I think I gave it a 5, the last episode. I would give this, I'm going to give it a 6, and I don't even really think it's that good a 6. It just needs to be better than the first one. As a standalone, like if you came into this, it's terrible because they don't give you, like you need that setup of the first episode, as boring as it is. So as a standalone, it doesn't work, but overall, at least it finished the story, but it can't be more than the 6 because it's not a story that was worth telling to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I gave the last one a really low rating, and this isn't much better, but I mean, I have to acknowledge that I was blown away by this reveal that he had recovered from autism, but it gave him a superpower. Like, that was mind-numbing.
That's worth something.
That's got to be worth something, because at least I was just like, what is happening on the show? And, like, the final, like, it does take the last 15 minutes for any action to happen, and it's okay action. I would have preferred if they'd just been that 15 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
So I guess I will give it, I think I gave it a 2 last time, 2.5.
Oh, wow. I thought you were going to give it a 5 or something.
It's so bad. So bad.
So hold on, what's our overall ranking of it? I know it's only 4 scores, but what is it?
Well, let me punch into the continuum direct computer here, and I'll give you our overall rating for the show. What do you think it's going to be?
I think, I think we need a sound effect for the computer, like beep boop boop bop burp 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 burp, something like that.
That's me typing into the continuum direct computer.
No, you've typed it in, and then it makes those noises, and then it comes out in a piece of paper, but it's got, along the sides of the paper, it has those little holes in it, you know?
A dot matrix printer is just printing it out.
Yeah, you got to rip off the sides. Anyway, so that's what happens.
Excellent. Well, the overall rating for this miniseries, this failed pilot miniseries for the new Invaders, for us, 3.875.
That's got to be the worst score you've ever had.
No,
it's not.
Obviously, Justice League.
I always forget about Justice League, which I think its score was like 0.5 or something like that.
I mean, the sin of this show is just being boring. So boring.
You're right. That's what it is. The biggest sin. Is it really bad? It's like, nah, it's just like a real waste of time. Like, you'll just be checking your watch every 5 minutes.
It's one of those things. I hopefully it wasn't too boring to listen to us talk about it, but it's such a tough show to watch that I hope it doesn't translate into the podcast. I mean, it might a little bit, but yeah, I definitely would never recommend this show to anyone.
Well, I'm just glad it didn't really kill Bakula's career because he kept working.
Oh yeah, Bakula's fine. You can't kill Bakula.
Yeah.
He's a Dracula.
Oh, I like that. Bakula's a Dracula.
Yeah, that's why you can't kill him. Except for, stake to the heart.
Well,
don't do it though,
there
Jordan. Stop thinking about it.
No, I would never kill Bakula. You know that.
All right, good. That's it for the episode, I think. This podcast, episode 2. If you want to write into us, if you have anything about the Invaders that we missed, that you think we desperately need to know, or, I don't know, just talk to us about Scott Bakula, maybe. We'd love to talk about Scott Bakula, apparently.
I wish there was more to talk about him in this thing, but he just ran around looking at stuff.
Well, you can write into us at continuumdrag@gmail.com. And on Instagram and Twitter, you can follow us at continuumdrag. We'll have some actual clips from these shows. I think there's some fun stuff in this episode that we can probably add to the Instagram, and maybe we'll post that Variety article or something. There's a Variety reviewed this at some point, but we'll find some junk to put up there, right?
Yeah, well, I'll put something up.
We'll figure it out. And in the meantime, thank you for joining us for this little journey into this weird miniseries that I'm not surprised the world has forgotten about. But thanks for joining us. And Jordan, I guess I'll see you next week.
Yeah, I'll see you next time.
Continuum Drag is recorded at Astrolab Studios in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Ruxedler. Produced by Jordan Delic and Luke Black. Special thanks to Adam Wheatner, Jeff Hanley, and Dwayne Wright.